Gloria not always was that woman with a gaze off and movements fragile. There was a time in which the flashes followed her. The crowds chanted his name and the water was his second skin. She was a champion national swimming championship, a promise Olympian, admired by his technique impeccable and its natural charisma. In that time, lived in an apartment bright with its husband Felipe, an engineer passionate for photography and for the breakfasts late Sundays. They loved each other with the complicity of those who grew up together, of whom they knew to be read the gestures without the need for words. The days were full of projects, laughter and short trips that they knew to eternity. But everything changed a tomorrow anyone. When a stranger calls broke up forever, he rhythm of your heart. Felipe had dead in an car accident. No witnesses, no explanation, just a sharp turn, a wrecked car and the empty absolute. Snap history T-Touch from me home. Subscribe to the channel now same. Your support us allows continue counting stories that deserve to be heard. From then, Gloria became in a shadow of itself same. She abandoned the swimming pools, the events, friends. The pain left her breathless, and soon after began the ailments, physical. Nausea persistent, pains sharp in the abdomen, a fatigue that did not subside with anything. The doctors could not find a clear cause, and in the middle of that uncertainty appeared Dr. Marcio, a gastroenterologist who worked in a clinic private. Since the first moment was shown kind, available, almost paternal, he offered her an experimental treatment based in a diet, liquid and insulation absolute to reduce stress digestive. But more beyond the treatment, what Gloria accepted was his presence. Someone who would take care of her, who would not demand anything from her smile, that would respect your pain. So began a relationship that soon led to in coexistence, and months later in marriage. Nobody knew much of that, not even Flavia, his best friend. At first, everything it seemed understanding. Marcio was in charge of the shopping, the cooking, and administering the medicines. The rural house where lived was surrounded by trees, with an empty pool and a gate that always remained closed. Gloria, still weak and convinced that her body was failing, accepted that routine. Soups, smoothies, infusions. No bread, no meat, no fruit whole. Every time he asked Marcio answered him in a tone serene but firm, that your system digestive would not resist it, that a relapse could be fatal. He also banned visits, even calls. He argued that the contact external altered his system nervous and therefore his stomach. Little by little, Gloria stopped insisting. Her body turned further fragile, its movements slower. It felt exhausted even when walking from the bedroom to the bathroom. But I trusted, because the pain of having lost Felipe had taught that it was better to depend on someone than to feel that kind of loneliness again. The months passed and reality became diffuse. Gloria barely recognized herself in a mirror. Your fur was pale, her eyes sunken, her hair further thin. He slept much, spoke little, and his world was reduced to the bed, the armchair and short walks in the garden rear. Marcio took decisions she controlled his schedules, his medication doses, his diet. Always, he said it was for her good. When Gloria doubted or tried ask something, he would smile at her and look away her topic. I told him that he should trust, that she was too vulnerable to handle his life alone. Sometimes he spoke to her tenderly, other times with impatience, but never allowed questions. Thus, what began as a care relationship was mutating in an invisible cage where love was confused with obedience. One day, while sweeping porch under Marcio's watchful eye, Gloria felt a pang of something I didn't feel toward much suspicion. He saw how he received a box of unlabeled medicines from the hands of a man who was not wearing a gown or, it seemed, pharmacist. Marcio got nervous. He made her enter quickly and changed the subject. That night, when taking one of the capsules he prepared for her in a glass of water, he noticed a taste different, more bitter. He thought and spit it out. but he didn't have strength to discuss. In the morning following, woke up disoriented with a dry tongue and no clear memory of the previous night. Something wasn't right. She started pretending to swallow the pills, hiding them under the tongue, and then spit them out in a handkerchief. Within a few days, he began to feel a little more lucid, with more energy. It was not his stomach what was sick, he thought by first time clearly. It was something or someone else. That change internal coincided with a miracle unexpected. Flavia's arrival. She appeared unannounced, knocking loudly on the door. She was wearing years without seeing her, but there was achieved his address by a contact common. Marzio tried prevent him the step, claiming that Gloria could not receive visits. But Flavia was stubborn, and seeing her friend so thin, so pale, so dull, turned her on by inside. He entered the house with determination and, after hug her, pulled out of his bag a banana. Marzio immediately protested, but Flavia ignored him. "Eat it, Glo. Just one bite," she said softly. Gloria trembled, hesitated, but did it, and nothing bad happened. Passed. Neither pain, nor vomiting, nor dizziness, only the sweet and warm taste of something that your body there was missed more than I imagined. Snap Part T reached the heart. I order something from the soul. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue counting stories as this. That little one victory was enough to light an alarm in Flavia. That same one afternoon, when Marzio went out to buy provisions, she looked for around the house. He found a first aid kit full of unlabeled jars, a medicine box defeated, and one folder with documents fake, diplomas, IDs, even a supposed licensed doctor who, when searching on the internet, did not correspond to any record officer. He also found Marzio's computer with the browser blocked and without network access. It was obvious something dark was happening. When tried confront Gloria, this broke in crying. "I didn't know that, believe. There. Was I had lived so long under Marzio's version that I no longer trusted him. Neither in their own memories. Flavia hugged her and promised that she wouldn't leave without her. That night, she slept in her living room sofa, but couldn't close the eyes. Something in Marzio's gaze, when he returned, seemed to him deeply disturbing. In the morning next, Flavia brought an apple. Gloria received it with trembling hands. Marzio was in the kitchen, but managed to see her bitey fruit. Your reaction was immediate. Threw his plate to the floor, shouted that he was putting his life in danger, and dragged her to the bath to make it vomit. It was the first time Gloria felt fear physical, the way he held her by the arms, the violence with which he closed the door. Flavia tried to intervene, but Marzio pushed her out of the room. When everything calmed down, he asked her to leave, that his presence only disturbed the health of his wife. Gloria, still in shock, she begged her friend with her eyes not to leave, but she couldn't. Pronounce word. Flavia understood he message and, upon leaving, dialed a number in his cell phone. It wouldn't go away very far. Over the next few days, Marzio became further aggressive, not with constant shouting, but with silences dense, with glances loaded, with phrases subtle ones that left Gloria on the verge of collapse. "If you don't want, stay alive, say it," he would say, as he poured her a glass of grey mush. He kept an eye on her. Constant did not allow him approach the gate, and hid the only visible phone of the house. But something was there changed in she. She was no longer the woman anesthetized from before. I remembered the sweetness of the banana, the firmness of Flavia's hug, the mental clarity that had recovered after stopping the pills, and with that little thread of lucidity began to search opportunities. One night, while Marzio was showering, he found a cell phone old man among some armchair cushions. It didn't have a chip but was loaded. He hid it under the mattress, praying that he wouldn't notice. It was his amulet secret for days. That hope became in urgency when Marzio, in a fit of rage, confessed something to her that left her frozen. They were arguing because she had refused to take one of the medicines, and he, amidst insults, shouted, "You don't understand anything. I got rid of Felipe so I could be with you, and neither that's how you value it." It was like, yeah, he world stopped. Gloria felt nausea, but not because he supposed problem digestive, but by he discussed the fear, betrayal. Marcio noticed his reaction and tried to retract, but it was already late. Gloria's eyes were open as they had not done so state in months. That night, she waited for him to fall asleep deep. He crawled to the armchair, turned on his cell phone, and dialed the only number that he remembered by heart. Flavia's. Barely could speak, but said, "Enough, help me, I am trapped. He killed Felipe." Flavia did not lose time. I already had serious suspicions, but here that phrase broke any doubt. He called the police immediately, gave the address, and drove to the house with a heart in the throat. Meanwhile, Gloria returned to hide his cell phone and lay down pretending sleep. Your body, I was trembling, but his mind was alert. Marcio was snoring heavily in his room from to side, oblivious to what was by come. They passed almost 2 hours before I heard the first noises, cars braking, quick footsteps, a sharp knock on the door. Marcio woke up stunned, and when opened, it was received by 3 officers armed. He tried resist, lied, said that his wife had a mental illness, and that I needed special attention. But when one of the police officers saw he state Gloria's physique, her cadaverous face, her arms full of bruises ancients, knew that it was not a simple argument domestic. The operation was fast. They searched the house, found the non-prescription pills, documents false, the browsing history deleted. Marcio was arrested in the act and handcuffed in front of Gloria, who didn't know, cry, scream, or faint. Flavia came in running, hugged her tightly, and they both collapsed in a floor between sobs and broken words. That night, for first time in a lot time, Gloria slept in a bed different. A hospital bed, yes, but free. They made her exams, analysis. They talked to her psychologists and prosecutors. Little by little, the truth was coming to light. Marcio was not a doctor. He did not have studies and had background by fraud and identity theft in other state. But the most creepy, it was the confirmation coroner. Felipe's car had been manipulated, and the fingerprints coincided with those of Marcio. The trial was media. The story of Gloria, a former swimmer trapped in a network of manipulation and violence, captured the country's attention. She testified with her voice trembling but firm. He told everything, from the first symptoms, diet liquid, the isolation, until Marcio's confession and the final rescue. Flavia also testified, presenting the evidence she had collected, including a cell phone with the audio of the call for help. The prosecutor's office rebuilt Marcio's profile as a manipulator, cold and calculating, who took advantage of women vulnerable to exercise, can absolute about their lives. Their condemnation was example: 38 years in prison by homicide willful, deprivation illegal detention, falsification of documents, and attempted femicide. Gloria, seated in the courtroom, he felt an unbearable weight free yourself from your chest when heard the sentence. It wasn't just justice, it was the end of a nightmare. But the real one, reconstruction, did not start in the courts, but after. Gloria passed weeks in recovery medical. Your body needed nutrients, but his mind too. The first spoonfuls of solid rice tasted like freedom. The first steps in the pool, still difficult, reminded him who he was. Flavia was at his side in all moment. It reminded him of the songs they listened to as teenagers. It showed him photos of the competitions. I was talking to him about what the world still could offer her. Gloria cried a lot, but he also laughed by first time in years. He accepted aid psychological, gave interviews, spoke in conferences about invisible violence and relationships. Toxic. He became, unwittingly, a voice for others' women. Never imagined that his history would save to others, but so was. The water, a time his stage of glory, became his again shelter. The training at the beginning was symbolic. 10 minutes in, he walked her, then 15, then half an hour. It didn't matter his stopwatch, nor the times, nor the applause. What mattered was to feel he body move without fear, without external control. Each stroke was a way of healing he used. His ancient cap blue, the one that Felipe had given away before his last competition. As he got out of the pool, he held it against his chest and breathed deep. I knew that the duel would not end completely, but I also knew that living anchored in the past, was another form of confinement. Flavia encouraged her to participate in a local competition for former athletes. At first he refused, insecurity out of modesty. But then he understood that it wasn't about winning, but about closing a cycle. He signed up, trained during 3 months, and the day of the event, when his name rang by the speakers, the ovation. It was so unexpected as healer. T moved this moment. Then you go without subscribing. That's why we allows continue sharing stories that heal. In that competition, Gloria did not win gold medal, but a smile that lit up his face, the soul. Upon emerging from the water, amidst the embraces of strangers and the tears of old people, companions saw a man in the stands with a sign that read, "Freedom Tea." It looks good. His name was Mateo. He was the team's physiotherapist, and he'd observed during the training. There were none love, neither promises fast. Just one conversation, simple, in the park bench close, where they talked about books, losses and second lives, opportunities. Mateo did not offer him save her. He offered her walk to your side. That difference changed him everything. Months passed, dating without rushing, learning each other's. Glory still had scars, physical and emotional, but by first once, I felt that someone was looking at them with respect, not with pity, neither intent to manipulate. With the time, Gloria and Mateo began to share more than coffee and chats. He encouraged her to write about his experience, to leave a record that could serve to others women. At first, she doubted, "Who I would like to read your history." But by putting the words into paper, he felt something inside settle. Writing allowed him order, chaos. Looked from a distance the horror experienced and recognized his own strength. Flavia offered him accompany her in his process, and together they put together a small self-published book, which was distributed in circles of support for victims of abuse. Responses were not long in coming in arrive. Letters, emails, messages from women who met reflected in his story. Some thanked him by name, what they still couldn't say, in voice high. Others, they asked advice. Gloria did not feel an expert, but he understood that his testimony had value. He was no longer swimming alone, but by all those that still were caught. 1 year after the verdict, he organized an event beneficial with his old swimming club. The goal was to raise money funds for women's shelters in situation of violence. It was a resounding success. Local media covered the event, and Gloria was interviewed in television national. He wore simple, without makeup exaggerated, but with the expression of peace that contrasted with the images, ancient ones, that showed in screen. At the end of the report, the journalist asked him, "What would you say to the Gloria of Ago?" 3 years. She kept silent some seconds and replied, "I would tell him that he is not broken, that is being deceived, but that her instinct still is alive, and that when listen that inner voice, by however small it may be, follow it, because there the exit begins." That phrase went viral, and although Gloria wasn't looking for fame, he knew he was leaving a footprint that was worth it. The relationship with Mateo continued growing, but without shortcuts. They both knew that healthy love is not built on promises empty, but with presence, listening and respect. Gloria had relapses emotional. Sometimes I woke up with nightmares, others were startled by certain things, noises or gestures that reminded him of Marcio. But Mateo didn't try mute. Those moments, I validated them, contained and waited. That patience was a foundation of something new, something that was not based in need but in the election. One day, while they walked by his seawall, he told him, "You don't need me to rescue you, just that you accompany while you fly other time." And Gloria, without saying a word, took his hand and smiled at him. That gesture, simple but deep, marked the beginning of a new stage. Months later, they decided to move together to an apartment with a sea view. It was small, but full of light, like her. In that new home, Gloria laughed out loud again. She learned to cook. Dishes that during years believed forbidden, rediscovered flavors, textures, simple pleasures like bake bread or prepare a dinner for two. It started to give swimming lessons for children, something that never there was considered, and discovered a happiness different, that of seeing to others beat the fear of water, trust in their own bodies. Many parents, upon learning his history, they embraced her with admiration, but he kept saying the same thing. "I'm not brave. I just decided not to give up." He also took up a contact with old friends, rebuilding networks that Marzio had broken. Each reunion was a victory, and although the pain of having lost Felipe continued there, it was no longer a wound open. It was a scar that hurt less each time she lived fully, without fear, without chains. His life, little by little, became colorful again. One day, while Gloria was preparing a snack for his students, he received a handwritten letter. "I didn't have sender, only your name with a calligraphy firm." When he opened it, he found words that he had never imagined reading. It was from Marzio's sister. In the text, the woman asked sorry in name of his family. He said that Marzio had shown signs of imbalance from young man who had deceived many before Gloria, but no one imagined how far I would be able to reach. He also confessed that after his arrest, several victims had started to speak. The letter closed with a simple phrase, "Thank you for survive. Your courage helped uncover the truth." Gloria read all in silence. He didn't respond. He didn't feel "I hate it," but neither empathy. Just one calm, strange, that last puzzle piece would have wedged in. That night, in the shower, he let the water fell about his face for a long time, each drop wash one more peso. That same 1 week was invited to give a chat in a university on resilience feminine. He hesitated in accept. It was not seen as example of nothing, but Matteo encouraged her and Flavia accompanied her. In front of an audience full, shared his unvarnished story without drama. He spoke of how control can disguise itself as love, as how a victim, it may not seem like it from outside, and how his silence many times is born from fear, not conformity. When it ends, a young man from the audience approached crying. He confessed that his partner was also controlling their food, their outings, their networks, but until that moment, there was no understood that this was also violence. That confession made everything build to sense. Gloria understood that every word she shared had an echo, that transformed his pain in story could save others' lives, and that sustained her more than any medal. If something inside you moved reading this, subscribe to the channel. It's the only way to keep this alive space. They passed the months and Gloria decided, take a step further. Register in a career university student. There was abandoned the studies when overturned by complete swimming professional in his youth. But now I felt I could combine his life experience with a training academic. He opted by psychology. I wanted to understand more in depth the mechanisms of manipulation, emotional, the invisible traumas, the wounds that do not leave bruises. But they hurt same. At first she felt out of place, surrounded by students, further young people, with routines different. It cost him adapt, but it didn't take long in highlight. His maturity, his history, its natural empathy caught the attention of teachers and classmates. Flavia, true to her style, celebrated his license plate with a dinner surprise and a sign that said, "It's never too late to come back to start." Matthew, by his part, gave him a leather-bound notebook with the words engraved, "You write your future." With each class, Gloria reconnected with parts of herself, same as I believed losses. He began to participate in study groups, to write essays, to be discussed in seminars. In one of them, he proposed a chat about violence symbolic and was so well received that she was invited to replicate it in others' faculties. Your name began to circulate on professional networks, not because of what had happened suffered, but for what I was building. She was no longer just the woman who escaped a monster. She was a voice, authorized, one brilliant student, a future therapist. Sometimes, when looking at each other in he mirror, did not recognize his reflection, not by strangeness, but by admiration. She was another, stronger, freer, more complete. And although the scars remained there, they no longer defined his history. They were part of it, yes, but no, he sent her. Gloria, at last, belonged to herself, same. One Saturday in the afternoon, while organized materials for a presentation, Gloria found a box forgotten in the bottom of the closet. Inside, there was photos old, swimming medals, letters from Felipe, and newspaper clippings with his youthful achievements. He sat down in her floor, with the legs crusades, and it was taking out each object as Ye would take out pieces of a treasure old. Seeing the image of Philip holding it in arms after a victory, tears, they sprang up without warning. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. For everything I'd been through, even the pain. He remembered, as he used to say, "You don't need win to be great." That phrase, which in his, at one point it seemed corny, now had a new weight. Closed eyes, breathed deep, and decided keep everything carefully, not to forget it, but to honor it. Her story with Felipe had not been deleted by the horror experienced afterwards. On the contrary, it was the foundation on which it was now being rebuilt. That night, Gloria shared with Mateo the experience of going through the box. He listened without interrupting her, as if always did. Then he proposed something to her that left her in silence. Create a foundation with its name, no hers, but Felipe's. An organization that offered accompaniment psychological to victims of relationships abusive. At first he hesitated. He didn't know if it was him. Moment, yes, had the strength. But seeing the seriousness and the respect in Mateo's eyes, she knew she was not alone. She consulted with Flavia, with some teachers, and little by little it was Armando he project. They searched legal support. They put together a small team, and in less than 6 months, the Felipe Luz Foundation was registered. The name was a tribute, yes, but also a promise, to be a beacon for those who still they swam in the darkness. And so, with determination, calm down, Gloria did it again. History. The inauguration of the Felipe Luz Foundation was an event intimate but deeply symbolic. It was celebrated in his same center sports where Gloria had trained in his youth, attended former swimming teammates, some university professors, survivors of violence who already knew about it for his talks, and for supposedly Mateo and Flavia. There was no speeches grandiloquent, only sincere words. Gloria spoke last. She told us love, when it is real, does not hurt, neither encloses. He spoke of fear, of silence, but also of hope. His voice was trembling by moments, but each phrase fell as a stone to water, generating waves. It ended his speech with a simple phrase, almost whispered, "No one deserves to starve themselves same." The audience exploded in applause. That night, upon returning home, Gloria sat down on the terrace with a cup of tea and felt, for first time in many years, that everything was in his place. The foundation grew up further faster than they expected. At first they offered talks, legal, guidance and support emotional. Then they added support groups, empowerment activities, physical and art workshops, therapy. Gloria coordinated, yes, but she also got involved personally. I listened, accompanied, cried with those who they came broken, because she knew what it was like not to recognize himself in front of the mirror. I knew what it was, have afraid to chew, to speak, to exist. and that made her different. It was not an expert from paper, it was a survivor with a voice. Matteo collaborated from the logistical point of view. Flavia led the part communicational, and together they formed a trio unstoppable. Every story, new arrivals to the foundation became in a reason more to follow. And although some were very hard, all of them reinforced it is true that Gloria no longer doubted. What she had experienced had not been in vain. It was worth it resist. One day, while helped a 19-year-old young man to write his complaint, Gloria received a call unexpected. It was from the committee organizer of the National Swimming Games. He was offered a spot on the jury, honorific in the next edition. And also, they wanted surrender to him, tribute by his path, sporting and social work. For a moment, he hesitated. The Olympic swimming pool, the competition suits, the lights, they brought him memories beautiful but also painful. However, he understood that returning to that scenario, it would not be returned to the past, but demonstrate how far there was arrived. She accepted. On the day of the event, dressed in an elegant white outfit, she was received with applause. It was not the young woman faster than before, but a woman who had survived to something else difficult than any race, to a prison disguised as love. During the tribute, looking at the stands, saw faces of women she knew from the foundation. They were all smiling at her. She was not alone. That recognition framed a new stage. Gloria was invited to collaborate with prevention campaigns, to participate in panels and documentaries. His face began to circulate in means, but always with a clear focus. To make visible the invisible violence, that which does not leave brands physical, but can annihilate the soul. Each interview was an opportunity to break silences, to talk about limits, intuition, and support networks. It also began to write a column monthly in a mental health magazine, where shared reflections, personal, tools, practices, and responses to letters from readers. Matteo supported her in every step without invading. Flavia joked, saying that he had become the water activist, and in his background had reason, because if Gloria was clear about one thing, it was that pain did not have to be transformed in resentment. I could, in change, become in service, and that path gave him sense to each part of his history. One afternoon, while I was walking on the beach with Matteo, he asked him, sometime there was thought in being a mother. Gloria stopped. She was delicate. For years, her body there was been so weakened, his mind so fractured that the idea of motherhood seemed remote, even impossible. But now, with the body healthy, with life in balance and with a solid network at your disposal around, began to consider that possibility. They didn't answer it at that moment. They just walked in silence, letting the breeze did his part. Days later, in a dinner calm, Gloria took his hand and said, I don't know, I can, but I want to try it with you. Matthew didn't cry, but his eyes said it everything. They started to do checkups, get ready emotionally and physically. And although they knew it wouldn't be a simple process, they were willing to walk it together without expectations rigid, but with the heart open. The pregnancy didn't happen right away. There were appointments, waiting, and painful tests, further in the soul than in a body. And in the end, a soft-spoken gynecologist explained to them that it was possible, but would require a doctor. Gloria gave herself time to process it. I didn't want to force anything, nor live it as an obligation. He decided pause, heed treatment, and concentrate in what already had. If it comes, it will be beautiful. And if not, this one, life is also like that, one of Matteo's friends told him. Tomorrow, while they shared toast and coffee, that decision, far from closing doors, opened others. Shortly after, a young mother who was receiving aid at the foundation asked him to consider adopt your baby, who couldn't breed by reasons personal. Gloria and Matteo talked about it at length. They didn't take the decision lightly, but when they held the newborn born in arms by first time, they knew That was their answer, without a doubt. They put it on him, by named Elias, in honor of Gloria's grandfather. The baby came home wrapped up in a light blue blanket, with eyes barely visible open and a long yawn that stole them a laugh snapshot. Matteo improvised a lullaby while Gloria looked at him, incredulous, still having that little being in his arms. Everything changed at that moment. The early mornings became further short, the most hours intense. But love grew as a warm and unstoppable wave. Flavia became in the artificial, arriving each week with useless gifts but adorable, and recording each child smile as were championships. Cattle. The foundation paused some of his commitments so that Gloria could adapt to your new routine, and she, with dark circles but also with a renewed light in the face, accepted the challenge of mothering from a place free of fear. Being a mother taught Gloria another form of courage, the one who stands up with shouts or shows himself in covers, but the one with the small ones battles daily. Calm he crying, learning to interpret looks, follow forward despite the fatigue. It also allowed him reconnect with your body of a manner different. I don't eat any more athlete or survivor, but a support, like coat. Every time I breastfed, I felt like I was closing a wound more. That gave the child not only food, but a version complete of itself. Same. Matteo, patient and present, assumed each task with tenderness. There were no fixed roles nor demands. There were team. One morning, while Elias was sleeping about his chest, Gloria whispered into Matteo's ear, "Thank you for not saving me, for wait for me." He didn't reply. He just hugged her, further strong. At that moment, they knew that they had reached the goal more important of all. Life with Elias brought new rhythms, new silences, new learning. Gloria reduced her activities public for a while, but he did not stop accompanying the foundation processes. Recorded messages of support, coordinated meetings virtual, and once a month, he attended with Elias in arms to the team meetings. And he said that he was important that your son grew, seeing what love can do build when it is put into service. To a few months, his history was selected to form part of a documentary about women resilient. During the recording, there was a moment that moved the team whole. Gloria swimming slowly in the pool, with her son little watching her from the edge. That image, loaded with symbolism, was the cover of the project. The documentary was called Reborn and was displayed in festivals. Of everything he country, not by his tragedy, but by the power of its transformation. As time went by, Gloria became concerning in more than one area: sports, social, academic. She was recognized by human rights organizations, invited to conferences international, and honored in his hometown with a plate in the center water where learned to swim. But what she valued was the invisible, the spontaneous hugs of women who found her in a supermarket, and they would say, "You helped," "Me out," the anonymous letters that arrived at the foundation, the smiles of the children to whom taught to float without fear. Never. He sought to be a symbol. He only wanted live without chains. And on that path, he ended up illuminating many. One night, while she was reading a story to Elias before going to sleep, he asked her, "Mom, do you are a heroine?" Gloria smiled and kissed him on the forehead and replied, "No, son. I'm just someone who learned not to give up." As Elijah grew up, Gloria discovered new ways of looking a world. Every discovery of his son, a new word, a fall without crying, one laugh unexpected, became a mirror where she was also rediscovering herself. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He didn't compete, he didn't demonstrate, he didn't justify, he just lived. Matteo used to say that Gloria had a special way of living he present. As each minute out one conquest, and such maybe it was. Because after having survived so much, each moment of peace had the value of gold. It began to write a second book, this time further intimate, less testimonial, and more reflective. He titled it The Calm That Came After, and in its pages he spoke of forgiveness, of the body as territory, of motherhood chosen, about the difference between healing and forgetting. It was published by a small publishing house, but with soul, and it reached the hands of those who they needed it most. 1. Autumn afternoon, Gloria was invited to a secondary school to talk to teenagers about relations healthy. At first, the audience was scattered, full of laughter, nervous and whispered. But as he began to tell his history, not with drama, but with truth, the silence was growing. He spoke of signs, of control disguised as care, of words that hurt more than the blows. When finished, the girl stood up and said, "My boyfriend doesn't let me use certain things. Colors, because he says, they provoke me problems. Never I thought that was violence until now." That moment reaffirmed his purpose. Not all battles are fought in courts. Many begin in classrooms, in conversations honest, in the possibility of putting name what hurts. Gloria came home that day with the heart full, because I knew what to sow. Consciousness was also a way of taking care of Elijah and his generation. The second book had further impact than they imagined. He was quoted in thesis university students, commented in reading groups, feministy, and adapted in parts for health campaigns, public. But more beyond recognition, what excited Gloria was the messages I kept receiving. "I read your book, and I decided to put it down. Now I understand what I experienced. I thought I was the only one." Each testimony was an echo that reminded her that speaking there was worth it. Flavia, always at your service side, proposed to him so do a podcast series where others women could tell their stories with their voice in his time. They called it Listen to Your Voice, and it became a space safe, intimate, and powerful. Each episode was recorded respectfully, unhurriedly, and edited by Matthew, who had turned expert in give technical form to the soul of the stories. Elias, curious, asked always, "Who speak today, Mom?" One day, while they reviewed ancient files from the trial against Marcio, Matteo found a folder that never had wide open. Inside there was a written letter by Felipe, found among his belongings after the accident, but classified as irrelevant by the researchers. Gloria read it with trembling hands. In it, Felipe spoke of his love for her, of her dreams, and of something that had noticed toward weeks, a man who followed him, who seemed watch your steps. He ended the letter with a phrase disturbing, "If something happens to me, you will know that it was not coincidence, but whatever happens, it continues swimming, Gloria. Because you were born to fly in the water." She broke in crying. It was a painful confirmation, yes, but also a blessing, because even from suspicion, Felipe had her pushed to continue. That night, he returned to the pool and swam further, stronger than ever. For her, for him, for everything that is still would come. After that evening in the pool, Gloria took a decision, silent but firm: organize a competence annual swimming competition in memory of Felipe. Not to pay tribute his death, but to celebrate the life they both dreamed of. He called it the Tournament of Light and proposed that there be no categories, neither medals conventional. The only one requirement was to swim by a personal cause, a grief, a fear, a dream. The initiative was enthusiastically welcomed by clubs, schools, and former athletes. On the day of the first tournament, the water, it seemed full of emotion. Children, adults, grandparents, everyone, they swam with a purpose. At the end of the event, instead of awarding trophies, handwritten letters were given, thanking the value of each participant. Elias, with barely 5 years, crossed by first time a pool accompanied by his mother. Gloria cried when she saw him, but not of sadness. It was pure, round, clean joy, like the water that had it brand so many times. That tournament became tradition. Every year gathered more people, more stories, more tears shared. It became in a healing ritual collective, where each armful had a meaning. Gloria continued swimming, teaching, writing, raising. Her life wasn't perfect. She had days of anguish, of exhaustion, of painful memories, but was full of meaning. He learned to embrace your limits, to ask help, to rest without guilt. The foundation grew, added new locations and professionals committed. Flavia started a program specific for teenagers, while Matteo coordinated alliances with universities. Gloria, without intending to, became in one of the most voices respected in the field of support for victims of violence emotional. All of that built step by step without losing his center, because never further allowed someone decided by she. Now it was her who elegy each plate, every hug, every path, and that freedom, at last, was hers. One winter morning, while I was preparing coffee in his kitchen, Gloria received a call from the Ministry of Sports. They informed him that there was being selected to receive the Medal of Sporting and Social Merit, a recognition reserved for those who, in addition to standing out in sport, they have turned his environment. When I hung up, it stayed some minutes in silence, looking out the window. He thought in the glory of ago years, the one who slept in fear, the one who believed that her body was weak, which confused obedience with love. And then he thought in the woman she was now, mother, professional, activist, swimmer. She smiled, not because pride, but by amazement, because never imagined that, after lose it everything, would build so much. Matteo hugged her from back. Elijah entered running with a drawing in the hand, and for a moment, the world it seemed complete. The ceremony was scheduled for the month next. This time, it wasn't about competing, it was about being thankful. On the day of the ceremony, Gloria came on stage wearing a dress light blue, simple, elegant. In the public, there were Flavia, Matteo, Elias, his foundation team, former coaches and dozens of women who had accompanied in his healing process. Upon receiving the medal, he didn't give a long speech. He simply said, sometimes, surviving. It is already a form of victory. And when surviving is transformed in serve, then pain finds his purpose. The room stood up, not for protocol, but by respect. That night, back at home, Gloria kept the medal in a wooden box next to Felipe's letter, the cap blue of his competitions, and the first drawing that Elias had given him made with crayons. It was his altar of life, not of achievements, because what he had conquered was not measured in medals. It was measured in peace, in dignity, in self-love recovered. With the passing of the years, Gloria was going down a rhythm, but without ceasing to be present. He left the address active of the foundation in the hands of a team younger than her same that was formed, and assumed a role further advisory. It continued writing, although with less hurry, and gave you talk only when felt he had something new to contribute. He dedicated himself more to the home, to his family, to enjoy the days without an agenda. Matteo and she embarked in small trips by the interior of the country, to places calm down where could walk hand in hand without anyone the recognized. Sometimes he was surprised at how happy he felt with so little. A long breakfast, an afternoon of reading, one slow conversation. I didn't need prove anything to anyone. His life, after having been kidnapped by control, it was all his now, and each decisions, even the simplest ones, were celebrations of freedom. Elias grew up knowing who his mother was, not only because of what she had lived, but for what there was chosen to be later. At school, when asked when speaking of an admirable person, he did not hesitate. He spoke of Gloria. He said that her mother knew swim more, stronger than him fear, and that helped people who had forgotten same. Gloria, upon hearing it count, that in a school reunion, felt a knot in the throat, not by pride, but by emotion. Because I knew that everything there was done, all the pain transformed, everything he courage cultivated, was leaving his son an invisible inheritance but powerful. The certainty that no one deserves live in fear, and that every person has the right to start over. That was his greatest medal, the one that didn't shine in display cases, but in the soul. One Sunday while Gloria and Elias walked by He Park, they came across a woman who looked at her fixed during several seconds. I had red eyes, like had just cried. He approached him timidly and said, "You don't know me, but I followed his history. 2 years ago I ran away from my partner after listening to her in an interview. That day I understood that I was not crazy, who was just trapped." Gloria hugged her without saying a word, because there was something about those kinds of encounters that transcended any praise. It was the echo of his struggle, of his true. When the woman left, Elijah asked her why people hugged her without knowing her. Gloria explained that sometimes, when we share what we live, we help to others without knowing it, and that this was a gift. Elias, curious as always, he just replied, "Then you are as a flashlight for those who are in the dark. If you are reading this and you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Your support is what we allows continue illuminating stories as this." That phrase was left giving turns in Gloria's mind for days. And it was he boost for your third book, one intended for the public young, written in clear and direct language, full of examples every day about as recognize relations harmful, how ask help, how rely in oneself. He titled it Lantern, in honor of the metaphor of his son. The book was adopted by several schools as supplementary material and was translated to others' languages. But the most important, it was that it opened a channel of dialogue between adolescents and adults, something that Gloria considered urgent and necessary. It was no longer just about healing wounds of the past, but to prevent those of the future. And in that bridge between generations, he found a new purpose, because understood that each history shared in time could prevent another person from falling in his same well. And that was, for her, the true legacy. Gloria's routine continued being calm, but never empty. I often received invitations for projects, campaigns, collaborations, and although many times she said no, she lovingly chose the causes that still moved her. One of them was the creation of a program, national training for health professionals, about violence, symbolic and manipulation emotional. Participated in content development, team training, and impact assessment. When it was implemented in hospitals public, various nurses wrote to him saying that now they knew as detect signs subtle in her patients. That moved her deeply, because not only was I helping victims, but also those who could protect them. It was given realized that his history, woven with so much pain, had been turned in tool, in map, in warning, and that the silence that some once he tied her up, now she was his engine, so that no one further shut up. Matthew, by his part, also grew up alongside she, abandoned his previous employment to dedicate oneself by fully committed to producing content with social impact. Together, they formed a small family business that combined technology, communication, and training in human rights. Elias, with his 10 years already compliments, began to accompany them to events. Just ask Mass, get involved. One day he told them that when he grew up I wanted to be like both of them, but with a detective cap. Gloria laughed heartily. The image of her son, investigating injustices with a flashlight in her hand, it seemed perfect. Flavia, meanwhile, continued as director executive of the foundation, tireless, lucid, firm. The bond between the three was unbreakable. They had gone from being friends to being chosen family, and each one, since his place, wove a network that arrived each time further far away. A network that was born of love, not pain. An anniversary. The foundation's main event was celebrated with a public event. There were workshops, children's activities, testimonials, art exhibits, and music live. Gloria came up on stage with Elias by the hand and, looking at the audience, said something that had written the night before. When a woman recovers his voice, not only is she freed, she frees those around her, her son, her friend, her community, and that the chain of freedom has no end. The people applauded, standing up, and among them, Several former users of the foundation, they cried openly because they knew what she was talking about, because they had seen her come in, broken, and now they saw her whole, firm, generous. That night, as they closed the event, Flavia hugged her strong and said to her, "If Felipe could see you." Gloria didn't respond. She just looked at the sky with a tenderness quiet, like who he is wordlessly grateful for everything that life has given him back. Shortly after, he received a special invitation. Give a chat at the United Nations headquarters on the power of stories personal in the prevention of gender violence. He was one of the moments further exciting of your life, not for he protocol, nor by the languages, nor because of the magnitude of the scenario, but because I knew I was carrying with him each scar, each woman who inspired her, each silence that he managed to break. The conversation was applauded standing, and his final sentence remained recorded in many minds. We don't need to be heroines. We just need spaces where we can be human without fear. Upon returning, Elias waited for her in the airport with a hand-painted sign that read, "My mum speak in he world." Gloria hugged him strong and knew that, no matter how far we'll arrive, your place further important always would be that, the home that was there built with love, respect, and truth. As time went by, Elijah became a teenager observant, sensitive, and committed. He often helped in the activities of the foundation, and when had doubts about some situation that a colleague or a friend was experiencing, they would turn to Gloria with a maturity that excited her. One afternoon, she asked him, as there was knowing that something was not right with Marzio. Yes, all they thought he was a good man. Gloria thought so some seconds before answering, "Because my body told me so, but I didn't listen to him, because I confused care with control and company with confinement. I learned late, but I learned, and for that I teach you, so that you learn first." Elias looked at her in silence, like he processed something a lot further greater than a simple answer. At that moment, Gloria understood that her history was not only there Bran lives. There was also forming different men with more awareness, empathy, and respect. That night, Matteo suggested that they write a book. Together, the three, a family project that would blend their worldviews, Gloria's experience, the gaze analysis of him as communicator, and Elias's fresh curiosity. They titled it Conversations That Matter and structured it as a dialogue between generations. Each chapter addressed a topic: limits, self-esteem, relationships, grief, gender, future. Elias contributed questions real, some uncomfortable, others naive but deep. Matthew offered context, data, bridges. Gloria narrated from her heart. The book was launched in free digital format and went viral in schools and training spaces youth. More than a publishing success, it was a tool concrete, useful and close. Gloria felt that time more, your life found form in words. Because sharing wasn't just about telling, it was about building. Bridges, open doors, and say without fear, "I was there too, there, and I left." That family project not only joined more, but also opened new doors. They received invitations to chat in schools, book fairs, and programs educational. In each meeting, Gloria noticed how people were surprised to see that Elijah was not just a son accompanying his mother, but a young man with a voice own, able to name emotions and pose reflections deep. In one of those events, a girl approached him and said, "I would like my dad would speak with me as you talk to your mom." That phrase, simple and painful, reaffirmed everything that Gloria came building. A new way of connecting, of listening, of raising. There was no formulas magical, just presence, disposition, and dialogue. That night, back at home, Elias asked Gloria to teach him how to swim, butterfly style. Not because of the technique, he said, but because wanna feel how to fly under the water. Gloria laughed tenderly, and the next day she took him to the same pool where she was trained years back. Elias jumped into the water with clumsiness and enthusiasm, and Gloria accompanied him, showing him each movement with patience. At one point, he sank more than necessary and came out with one laughter. Now I understand by what they called him butterfly style. It's hard, but it's beautiful. Gloria watched it swim, splash, fail, and come back to try, and felt an emotion that was going further beyond pride. It was gratitude for having arrived at that moment, by have survived, by have built a life where laughter and water were no longer dangerous, but home. As he left, Elias said to her, "Mom, when swimming with you, everything feels further easy." She hugged him, soaked both of them, and he knew that this was the greatest victory, having returned to its son, a world without fear. With the years, the Gloria's name became synonym for courage, silent. It was no longer necessary to explain who he was. It was enough hear his history a time so as not to forget her, but she always rejection the security's grandiloquent. He said it was just a woman who one day had fear and chose do something with it. A woman who didn't want her pain to define her. In interviews, when she was asked as there was accomplished get out of such an extreme situation, always, she responded the same. "I didn't go out alone. Someone believed me, held me and opened the door for me. I just walked by her." That phrase became motto of many campaigns, even was registered in a plate commemorative placed at the entrance to the Felipe Luz Foundation. Every person who crossed that threshold read it, and many stopped some seconds forehead to she, because they understood that a way out was possible, and that someone I already had it to before. One day, in an exposure on human rights, a girl of barely 8 years old approached him with a drawing. It was a woman with cape and swimming cap, flying about a city full of lights. "You are my heroine," he said, with a smile shy. Gloria bent down and stroked him hair and replied, "You can be yours too, own heroine. Just listen, you heart, and never let no one turn off you voice." These kinds of encounters filled her more than any prize, because understood that his true mission, it was no longer swimming further fast, nor talk further strong, nor write further books. It was to be a beacon, to be a mirror, to be a living testimony that even from a background further dark, you can return to the surface. And not just return, but do it further stronger, wiser, more luminous, like a butterfly that after breaking the bud, discovers that always had wings. As he approached his birthday number 50 hours, Gloria began to receive messages and calls from people all over the country. Some had been helped directly by the foundation. Others had only heard his history in an interview or read one of his books. All they coincided in a thing, thanks to she, had been encouraged to look his own life with more compassion and more courage. Matthew and Elijah, without her, knew they organized a celebration surprise in her center water where all there was started. When Gloria arrived, believing she was going to a work meeting, found he place decorated with photos of his history, phrases written by women who had accompanied, and a pool full of children laughing. There was no speeches, just a soft song, sincere hugs, and an atmosphere that needed no words to say, "Thank you." That night, while they collected, Gloria sat alone for a moment by the pool. The water reflected the dim lights from the ceiling, and in that swaying of waves calmed down, you see his whole life pass like in a movie. He remembered fear, loneliness, violence, but also the awakening, strength, the decision to live. In his bag was wearing a letter that had written that same tomorrow, not knowing if she would read it. It was for her same. He opened it, held it in his hands, and read in low voice, "Thank you for not giving up, for going back to the water, for believing in you when nobody I did it more. To love again, to talk, to build, to continue." When finished, breathed deep, dried up a tear, and stood up. Elijah ran toward her and hugged her from behind. "Let's go home, Mom," he said. Gloria nodded. It was time to rest, and also to continue swimming. The years following were marked for stability, but not for stillness. Gloria and Matteo began to offer mentoring new foundations led by women, sharing tools, practices to start projects social sustainable. Many wanted to know how they had done it achieved without losing the essence, without falling in the ego or in he wear and tear. Gloria always, he said the same thing. Start from he heart, not from urgency. And take care of yourselves you first, because it is not possible save anyone from the exhaustion. His words, simple but loaded with experience, they resonated more than any manual. In parallel, Elias grew. At the age of 17 years, already collaborated. In the podcast edition, I designed materials, educational, and dreamed of studying psychology or communication, although he still wasn't sure. The only thing he said with certainty was that he wanted to continue doing things that will help to others. Gloria listened to him with pride, calm. I knew that the important thing was not the path, but the intention. One morning, while checking some papers, old ones to archive, Gloria found a folded sheet that I didn't remember have saved. It was a list that there was written during his confinement with Marcio. I had phrases such as, eat without fear, talk to Flavia, return to the water, sleep without pills, dance another time, do not forget who I am. There was written in secret, in a moment of lucidity, when I didn't know yet Yer would come out alive. Seeing that almost all those points had been compliments, and lots of them overcome, they were filled eyes of tears, not for what was lost, but for what was recovered. That list, written in the midst of the horror, there was been a map without knowing it. He put it away again, this time in his current newspaper, such as Who returns a part of itself, same to its proper place. Because that woman who dreamed of surviving now lived, and lived fully. The foundation celebrated his 20th birthday years with the exposure photograph that showed the before and after of dozens of women who had passed by there. Not just with images physical, but also with phrases that summarized their processes. From invisible to invincible. My voice came back, I'm mine other time. Gloria walked around the gallery, taken by the arm of Flavia, who still directed her project with the same passion of the first day. Each photograph was a mirror, each testimony an echo of what they same had lived. In a corner, Elijah had hanging an unpublished image of his mother, coming out of the water with a smile genuine, taken months after having escaped from confinement. Under the photo, a phrase that there was written without warning. My mom was born again, and this once he chose himself same. Gloria was moved to see her, not because of the image, but by everything that phrase enclosed. That night, after the event, the family gathered at home. Matteo cooked his dish favorite, Elias put on music, and Flavia brought an improvised cake with the number 20 in candles. They laughed, they toasted, they sang badly. It was a simple, intimate, perfect moment, glory to the noticed. From the table, and for a moment, he allowed himself close eyes. I felt that his life, with all its curves, its emptiness and its reconstructions, had arrived at a place sure. I no longer feared what was to come, because there was learned that even when everything breaks, something new can grow, and that the true force is not there in resist without falling, but in get up so many times as do missing. When he blew out the candles, he didn't ask wishes. He just thanked. And for his body, by his history, by have recovered he hunger to live, and for to have, at last, one life in which nothing was missing. Upon reaching the 55 years, Gloria received a proposal unexpected, being honorary director of a Latin American women's support network, Survivors of Violence. They invited her to represent their country in a series of meetings international, not as expert academic, but as concerning experiential. He doubted by a few days. He didn't like it, expose himself so much, but he understood that even had a lot by say, especially in places where his silence continued being the norm. He accepted. During the next 2 years, he toured cities, towns, communities, indigenous people, prisons, women, and shelters. He heard stories heartbreaking and also others full of hope. In each place, he repeated a phrase simple: "There is no wound that takes away your right to start over." His accent, his experience, and your warmth made women of all ages. They will trust in her. And so, without seeking it, she became on a bridge between cultures, between generations, between broken pasts and futures possible. In one of those travels, in a community in the interior of Bolivia, a grandmother gave him a hand-woven blanket with the sunset colors. "So that always remember that the sun returns every day," he told her. Gloria kept that gift as a symbol of everything she had learned, that healing is not a destination, but a movement constant, and that there will be gray days, but also new ones, beginnings. Returning home from that trip, he sat down in his desk and started to write what would be his last book. One choral memory built with the voices of women from all over Latin America. "I didn't want it to be my history other time, but many, because I understood that the collective also heals, and that sometimes what we cannot say alone, we can do it scream together." That book, still in process, became in his new north, his new leap into the water. With the manuscript advanced and life further in calmer than ever, Gloria resumed a routine that there was left out. Swimming at dawn. She went alone, unannounced, unaccompanied, just her, the water and the darling gradually clearing up. He said it was your way of listening, he silenced. In those moments, he remembered everything there was been: athlete, wife, hostage, survivor, mother, activist, writer. And at the same time, I felt that none of those labels contained her completely. She was simply Gloria, a woman who had learned to live without guilt. One morning, as I was leaving the pool, a young man who had her state observing him, he approached him and said, "Thank you for exist. You gave me permission to believe that I could also leave." Gloria didn't know that say. He just hugged her, like so many times there was done before, because there was understood that sometimes a hug can save a life. When he got home, that day, he found Elias with a mate in his hand and a smile accomplice. "Another time in the water, Mom?" She nodded. "Always I'm going back to the water. It's where I find myself." They sat down together in a garden, without hurry. Mateo came out with a blanket and covered both of them. It was a simple scene, without ornaments, but full of meaning. Gloria rested her head on his shoulder of his son and closed the eyes. "I didn't think in the future, neither I was reviewing he past. I was just breathing, and in that breathing, I knew that everything, it was fine, that there was honored his history, what was there chosen with conscience, that there was loved without measure, and above everything, that I no longer owed anything to anyone. No explanations, no sorry, neither permission, only the commitment to continue living with truth. And that, he understood, was the deepest form of freedom. They passed the years, and Gloria's story was adapted in documentaries, articles, and even in plays, community. But she never looked for prominence. He continued living in the same house, surrounded by photos, books, and plants, receiving women who were still looking for her for a talk, a guidance, or just a hug. The pool continued being his temple. Sometimes I went alone, others with Elias, who was already adult. There was elected study therapy occupational and worked with adolescents in risk situation. Flavia, although with less rhythm, followed being his partner and soul friend. Mateo, her life partner, continued writing and accompanying her in each project. One day, during an interview, they asked him that would change, yet could return back. Gloria thought for a long moment and replied calmly, "Maybe nothing, because even horror brought me here, and here, finally, is me." The interview closed with that phrase, but his history no, because Gloria never. He stopped moving, serving, loving. He lived many years more, in peace, doing what you do most loved, accompanying without judging, embracing without fear, and swimming every day as if it were the first. When died, in a serene morning, surrounded by the yours departure was celebrated, how it is celebrated a life well lived. The foundation continued with his name, with its legacy, and with a plaque that read, "Here, love was never disguised as control." And in the pool where all began, each a tournament is held. Each year with a slogan, Clara, swim by who they still don't dare. Because thanks to Gloria, many they learned to see, to speak, to stand up, and because his history, woven with pain, courage, and truth, became a beacon for thousands. Gloria, faithful to her name, shone until the end. If you got here, don't go without doing something important. Subscribe to the channel. It's thanks to you that you are stories they can continue reaching more people.